So let's dive into Vince. Let's dive into this matchup. And
Yes,
as we
please.
always do, we're going to start with the matchup of the Notre Dame rushing offense against the North Carolina rush defense. This is a bad on bad matchup. Notre Dame is trending in the right direction, and it was kind of funny.
They are.
I had a conversation, or I had a couple people, tell me that there's a group of fans that are sort of the, everything is awesome, don't criticize anyone crowd that said, like the last two games that, where's all the Jeff Quinn haters now? And my response was, I don't think 170 yards against USC's terrible defense at 4.15 yards per carry, and that being the rally cry, is making the point you think it's making. Especially considering the last two times you played at home against USC, Notre Dame ran for over 300 yards both times.
Yeah.
So, but here is the positive: they are going in the right direction.
They are. This number, that yards per game number, was in the double digits the last time we had one of these charts up. I believe it was like 98 point something.
It was in single digits. Yeah, double digits. Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
So now it's in triple digits. So they are trending in the right direction,
right.
No question. But 107.7 yards a game is terrible. I'm sorry.
Right, but it's 175 the last two games. And the reason I want to focus on that number two, why that's a good number, is because it's when they've really made the change on the offensive line and the left side. They basically went with Joe Wald at left tackle early again. I mean, they started Joe Wald against Virginia Tech, and then went to Andrew Christopher early. Yeah. And, still only 4.2 yards a carry, which isn't great. They only gave up one sack against USC, so you can't really say the sacks kept the numbers down. But it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Right.
175 yards a game in the last 2 weeks. 4.2 yards a carry is, you'd say, okay, is not great, but in the first 5 games, they were 1.9, 3.4, 3.5, 0.1 against Wisconsin. That was 3 yards on 32 carries, and then 3.0.
Right.
So again, it's a jump. And the reason it's important is I don't think Notre Dame has to dominate North Carolina with its ground game. The key for this game is going to be just like it was against USC and just like it was against Virginia Tech. Limit the negative plays and just be a good complement to your pass game. And I feel more this is the most confident I felt about Notre Dame's run game going into a matchup really since we first started to see what this Notre Dame defense was or offensive line was going to look like once we realized how bad it was.
Right.
This is the most confident I've been about this matchup all season, because at least the last 2 games, Vince, they're starting to find a level of consistent execution that's allowing the backs to do what they do. And I don't think North Carolina has the horses to stop them from doing that in this game.
Well, and you talk about doing what they do. I mean, look, Kyron Williams, we can all agree that he is a really, really good back. And on the low end, half of his yards were all on his own. And that's on the low end, right? That's the conservative end when I say half, right? If you give him any kind of a crease, which they started to do the last 2 games, right? This is when you see him start to take off, because he is that good. And you don't have to give him wide open lanes. That's not necessary. Right. You just have to give him a little bit of something, because I think he's also gotten better at being a little bit more patient, because that was kind of our rub on him, was that he tries to get to the hole a little bit too quickly.
Which early in the season I understood.
Yeah.
You understand why he was making that mistake.
Yes, absolutely.
His patience the last 2 games, Vince,
has been excellent. It's been excellent. I mean, he's been able to find holes that were not there when he got the football in his hands.
And this is a bit of a change of subject, kind of, but it's about what you were referring to. This is exactly why what's happening to him this year is actually not hurting his NFL draft stock. Correct. It is actually helping it. Because teams are watching his film and saying, that guy is getting very little help, and look what he's doing.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing for me, is when I watch Kyron Williams play, he's been able to just find creases. Now, the reason the effectiveness of the run game is, and we talked about this early in the season, we talked about, against Toledo and against Purdue, whenever they give him any kind of crease, he's turning them into like 40-yard touchdowns, right? Well, we're seeing a little bit more consistency in that regards the last couple games where Kyron's been able to kind of hit it and hit it and hit it. And it hasn't been the big gains. It hasn't been the 40-yard gains and the 50-yard gains. It's been more of an efficient, because what you have to be careful of is, I think I'm trying to look at Kyron's numbers last week. I think he had like 138 yards rushing, Vince, something like that.
It was 138.
138 at 5.5 yards per carry. It's a good number. But when you look at it, though, he didn't have that really long. I think his longest run was like, 38 yards, right?
He didn't have a big, long to kind of skew the numbers.
So
now, there were a couple where he was close to breaking them, but he didn't.
Right.
I mean,
The point being that if you take away his top carry, it's 100 yards on 24 carries. That's not blow you away numbers. But what I liked about the performance, and I'm going to give the offensive line credit for this as well as Kyron, who played phenomenal football, is they were able to efficiently attack USC in the first half. You didn't have the -2s, the +1s on first down. They used the pass game on first down so effectively in the first half that it got them in positions where you're 2nd and 2, you're 3rd and 2, where, hey, we can run it, we can throw it, we can do whatever we want. You couldn't just key the run. And I think that's something that helped Kyron be effective too. They went more towards running on first down in the second half, and you started to see them getting more 3rd and long situations, which is obviously something that they need to be mindful of. That's what good self-scouting should show you right after the game. Look, reality is when we can effectively throw on first down, we're a better offense. It doesn't mean you only throw on first down. You can never become that. That helps. And this is what we get to is reverse engineering the pass game, the offense, to where the pass game becomes a focal point. And as they've done that, it's made Kyron so much better. So I think these numbers right here that we're looking at here with Notre Dame, I think are a bit misleading. I think right now I expect Notre Dame to be better than that in this matchup. How much better is going to be the key, because this is not a good North Carolina run defense. And I think these numbers over here are a little bit misleading as well, because North Carolina had one game against Virginia that was an anomaly. They gave up 24 yards on 22 carries. In their other 6 games, they've given up 127 yards, 172 yards, 261 yards, 130 yards to a bad Duke offense, 228 yards, and then 157 yards to Miami this past week. And I believe Miami was playing without both of their top 2 running backs in that game, at least a couple of them. So to me, when I look at that, that's a Miami team that's not exactly a great rushing offense. Miami had 322 yards against Central Connecticut State, 87 against Bama, 175 against App State, 52 against Michigan State, 95 against NC State, and 169 against Virginia, whose defense also stinks.
Right.
So Miami has their 2nd best yards per attempt game of the season against North Carolina. Right. And so that's I'm giving that for context, because 157 yards may seem like an okay day, but when that other team doesn't run for 157 yards,
what they normally do. Yeah, right.
So I think this is a North Carolina defense that can be run on. My fear is the same as last week, because again, we're still learning just who this team is. Are they gonna say, okay, well, we can control the clock? I'm afraid that they're going to get into the mindset they got into last year, which against North Carolina, which is control the clock, keep their offense off the field, because I don't think this team is capable of doing that. Not against this offense, because this offense is more dangerous than the USC offense. We talked about that when we did the USC post game. There's no Drake London on this team, but there's 3 or 4 guys can really hurt you. They run the ball a lot better. They have a more mobile quarterback and a much more effective passing quarterback in Sam Howell. So that makes the offense more dangerous, to where you can't just, okay, we got a 7-point lead, let's milk this thing. You've got to come out trying to score every time you get the football. And so to me, they can run on North Carolina. I just hope they don't get too obsessed with trying to run on North Carolina. But if they can be assignment correct, if they can limit the negatives, then I do think the run game can have a big impact on this game, Vince, whether they run for 175 plus, which is what they've done average the last 2 games, or if they only run for like 130, 140. It's about efficiency. Make North Carolina defend both parts of your offense. That, to me, is the key in this game.
Yeah, and I don't if they never run 13 personnel again outside the 5-yard line, I'll be happy. And
just
I don't
prepare yourself not to be happy then.
I know. But going to your point in that, is Notre Dame going to come out and be like, okay, we need to possess the ball, we need to run the ball, we need to do that, and we see 12 and 13, more so the 13. 12 I can get on board with because they're generally not going to have both tight ends attached when they run 12 personnel. Okay. And Alan, I saw your message earlier, by the way. He says I ordered my IB shirt and flag, which is freaking awesome, by the way. He apologized for the betting advice in the second half. He goes, I forgot to take into account that Kelly doesn't like to put his foot on people's throats, and he's right. But anyway, they're not going to be able to be ball control. It's just not the way this offense is going to be good. They're going to get bogged down, right? And even if Tyler Buckner is the quarterback, that's still not the offense that you want to run. You don't want to be bogged down. That doesn't work, at least with this offense. And so I hope that they continue to do what they were doing on Saturday and kind of abandon the idea that, okay, we need to hold on to the ball longer than North Carolina. Right. That's not the game. That can't be the game plan because that's not who you are. You have to know who you are. And I feel like maybe they do know who they are, but don't remind yourself of last year because that's not who you are this year.
Right. My hope is that based on what we saw this past week with the USC game, that they're not going to get into that mode. And that was my fear last week as well. USC was a team that could score. Notre Dame came out early and went after them. Of course, second half, they tried to go away from that, and it allowed USC to get back in the game.
Right.
That's the biggest lesson they have to take from last week is if you have a 17-3 or a 14 to a 17-point lead at halftime against North Carolina, they can erase that like this.
Absolutely.
And so you have to keep the pedal to the metal in the third quarter if you have a lead. That doesn't mean you can't run the ball. It just means you need to stay balanced. But balance to me is going to be the key. And the other thing about this matchup is this has to stay low. And I think that's something we've seen the offense do a much better job of in recent games is not giving up as many negatives. And that's been huge. It's been huge for this offense. And a big part of it is back to what, and I know some of you are probably going to get sick of me here saying this, and I get it. I feel you, but a big part of that is keeping a body on a body. That's all you have to do. When you have a guy like Kyron Williams, all you have to do is keep a body on a body. You don't have to dominate. You don't have to blow them off the line. You know, in the last two games that they've played, Notre Dame gave up 3 tackles for loss against USC, one of them being a sack. They gave up 2 tackles for loss against Virginia Tech, and both were sacks. So they didn't give up a single run game negative. That, to me, is the biggest difference as far as just like statistically, the biggest difference in effectiveness, the biggest difference in the last 2 games compared to previous ones. Because not giving up negatives keeps you on schedule.
Right.
It keeps you. Notre Dame was in so many run pass options situations on Saturday against USC. It was phenomenal. What I mean by that is you want to be in as many down and distances as possible where you have the run and the pass at your disposal. Part of the reason they were so good in the first half on third down is because they were in so many third and medium to shorts, which means you can run it on 3rd and 4. You can run the football. I wouldn't recommend it a ton with this team, but it's still an option.
Fair enough.
So I think that's the thing for me. So the advantage in this game, the interesting part is the advantage in this game statistically goes to North Carolina overall, the big picture. But if I'm evaluating on what I've seen in the 3 most recent games, even with the Cincinnati game being part of that, to me it's advantage Notre Dame. That's kind of where I am. I think Notre Dame goes into this matchup heading in the right direction, and UNC's defense is not.
I was going to give a caveat. I was going to give my advantage to North Carolina, but with the caveat that Notre Dame's been playing better recently. Right. So You definitely, I want to say you stole my thunder, but we're on the same page as far as that is concerned, because if you're into stocks and things, like the arrow is here for Notre Dame's rush attack. I mean, they're going in the right direction.
Right.
North Carolina's been down here, and they're not getting any better. They're not getting any worse. They're just kind of not a good run defense. And Notre Dame has the ability to take advantage. I think they will. But if we're just looking at the numbers, it's advantage North Carolina.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. If it's a season long, numbers stack up, right? Like I used to write an article like that at BGI. It was like just looking at the numbers.
Yeah,
and numbers refer to total numbers and context of who you've played and all that. If we're just looking at numbers, it's not even close. I mean, as bad as North Carolina is, they're still significantly better statistically than Notre Dame. If we're talking specific matchup on October 30th, who has the advantage? I think Notre Dame has the advantage because they are playing better. I think they finally found some answers. As long as they stick with what we've seen, what we saw late against Virginia Tech and in the USC game in the first half,
right?
I think this team will come out and run the ball effectively against North Carolina. Before we move on to the past game, Vince, we have a super chat from JP Buellsfeld. He says, Bryan and Vince, thank you for everything you do for us in IB Nation. I challenge every single person watching this chat right now to support IB Nation. And JP, that means a lot to us. It means a lot to us. And, everything we do for IB Nation, well, we do what we do for IB Nation because we love Notre Dame football, but also because we love this community, and the support we got has been tremendous. I'm going to have an announcement coming up here very soon on the message board about what your support on the message board and on the on the podcast and the YouTube channel is going to allow for us to do in 2022. It's very, very exciting. So, but thank you for that, JP. I appreciate that very, very much.